Is it possible to forgive a person who once destroyed your trust and then live as if nothing had happened? And is it worth forgiving such a person at all? What do you think about this? My wife destroyed my trust and got what she deserved, but she wanted to stay with me with all her might. But the choice was mine alone. Throughout the journey home, Nick's grin remained steadfast. The news of his promotion had caught him off guard. He hadn't anticipated hearing about it for at least another few weeks. However, that very morning, Roseanne had entered his office with confidence and delivered the joyful announcement. Nick, the higher-ups were impressed with your handling of the Japanese situation, and frankly, none of us see any reason to delay. So, allow me to extend my congratulations as the new Vice President for Far East Sales. Nick had been taken aback, expressing his gratitude to Roseanne before engaging in a lengthy discussion about the perks and responsibilities attached to his new role. His elation was palpable, prompting him to promptly leave his office. Summoning Suzanne, he shared the news with her. "Suzanne, I hope you won't mind a change in roles." Nick observed with amusement as her expression shifted. "Nick, are you replacing me?" She appeared genuinely hurt. "Not at all, Suzanne. You know I couldn't manage a thing without you. It's just that you'll need to adjust to working under the Vice President for Far East Sales. Think you're up for it?" Suzanne's expression shifted from confusion to excitement as she embraced Nick warmly. Despite being a capable, somewhat plump woman in her middle years, she was at least 15 years older than Nick. Their bond ran deep, having worked together since his early days at Thomaston Chemical. She and her husband had even provided guidance to Nick and Emily when they were house hunting, and Nick had assisted Suzanne's eldest son in securing an internship at Thomaston. In her excitement, Suzanne bombarded Nick with questions about his new job. When he managed to interject, he asked, "Could you handle things here for today? I need to rush home and share the news with Emily." After another hug, Nick made his way to the parking lot, thinking of celebrating with champagne and a lazy afternoon with Emily. It was July, so Emily, being on summer break from teaching, would be at home. With both Charlie and Ben at day camp until late afternoon, they would have ample time together. Nick tapped the steering wheel in time with the Beach Boys, singing along loudly in a not particularly pleasant baritone. He didn't need to stop for champagne. He remembered there was a bottle in the fridge, untouched since their 11th anniversary 2 months ago. He couldn't wait to share his news with Emily, whisk her upstairs to the bedroom. But as Nick turned onto Thornton Drive, he spotted Emily's VW heading in the opposite direction, too far for him to catch up without speeding recklessly down the quiet street. Damn. He reached for his phone, dialing her number, but it appeared to be switched off. With a sigh, Nick parked in the garage and headed indoors. Maybe Emily had gone grocery shopping or run errands. Perhaps they'd still have a few hours together later in the day. He hurried up the stairs, changing out of his business suit for more casual shorts and a t-shirt. Quickly making himself a sandwich and grabbing a beer, he headed towards the patio in the backyard. However, as he passed the office, he noticed that Emily had left the computer on. Out of pure curiosity, he came over to find out what she was doing. Her email was open, but it wasn't her school account. Instead, it was a Hotmail account he didn't know about, with the username Jane309 including her middle name and date of birth. Why did she have a second email account? When he looked in the sent folder, he noticed only 2 names. Her sister, April from California, and the unfamiliar name, Jpritz. About 8 messages were sent to this address, including the most recent one. Nick opened it with a mouse click. J. "Oh my God, your message made me feel hot in some places. I can't risk Sunday. I don't know what Nick might be doing. Let's meet there on Monday at 11. I can't wait." "Show!" Nick leaned back in his chair in shock, staring at the screen. What the hell is going on? Having forgotten about his lunch, Nick resolutely delved into Emily's emails and conducted online research. It wasn't until an hour later that he pieced together the full story. Jason Pritzker, an educational consultant, had visited Emily's school for 2 weeks in early May to conduct professional development workshops for the teachers. On his website, he appeared as a handsome man in his late 30s, slightly older than both Nick and Emily. He was married with children and resided in Jefferson Meadows, located east of Columbus, about 25 miles from Nick and Emily's home in Grove City. Based on Nick's investigation, it seemed that Pritzker had taken an interest in Emily during the workshops and had been pursuing her ever since. Their exchanged messages started cautiously but grew increasingly intimate and passionate. 2 weeks prior, Pritzker had written to Emily, expressing that kissing you was the most erotic experience of my entire life. I carry around on my lips the indelible memory of you. They had met alone at least 3 times, and it was obvious that although Pritzker had not yet entered into a close relationship with her, he was approaching this moment. His recent message to Emily said, "My dear E, I have never seen or touched such a divine woman as you in my life. You are truly divine. We need more time. I long to be with you, completely, finally. Will you be able to break out on Sunday for our usual date? Yours, Jay." The only person Emily apparently told about her affair was her older sister, April. As expected, April was shocked and persistently tried to dissuade her. A week before, she wrote, "Have you lost your mind? Do you remember what happened to my friend Monica? How did her husband find out about her cheating and kick her out of the house? Do you realize that she now lives in a cramped apartment and sees her children only twice a week? Is it worth having an affair with some attractive stranger several times if Nick finds out about it?" There were 3 or 4 other messages similar to the one in April, and they all expressed similar feelings. In one of them she wrote, "Nick adores you, Em, and he's successful, a great dad to Charlie and Ben. You've even said yourself that you couldn't ask for a better husband, loving him more now than when you first got married. So what on earth are you thinking?" Emily seemed to struggle to justify her actions, although Nick's perspective might be biased. In one of her early messages to April about Pritzker, she mentioned, "I'm not planning to pursue anything with him, it's just harmless flirting, a bit of fun." April, married life can feel so monotonous sometimes. Teaching, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, running errands, spending time with Nick, watching TV, falling asleep, and then repeating it all over again. But with Jason, there's excitement, a spark. He compliments me, holds my hand, makes me feel young again. I'm not about to end my marriage over this. It's just a fleeting thrill. And more recently, she said, "Just relax, okay? It's just a fling, probably won't last a month. And I'm being extremely cautious to keep it from Nick. But I can't deny how turned on I was when when things escalated a bit. I was completely swept away. The intimacy with him promises to be incredible. And afterward, I'll return to Nick, happier than ever, and probably even more eager. He'll love it." Nick realized he had to leave immediately. He didn't even want to encounter Emily. He needed time to process the shock, pain, and anger. Leaving the computer untouched, he quickly ate his sandwich and tidied up, restoring the kitchen to its original state. Racing upstairs, he changed into his work attire and departed the house. Though an idea began to form, Nick understood he required time to fully develop it. He drove directly to the gym, where he swam laps for an hour. As he showered and dressed afterward, he largely solidified his plan. Nick was known for his directness, determination, and focus. At 14, he aimed for financial growth, managing the largest paper route he could handle. In college, his drive led him to complete a business degree in just 3 years, eager to embark on his career. And, when he encountered Emily at a friend's birthday celebration, 2 years post-graduation, he realized after their initial outing that he wanted to spend his life with her. He pursued her passionately with vigor and romance. Discovering her passion for ballet, he procured tickets for them. Upon meeting her mother, he inquired about Emily's favorite flowers and promptly purchased them. In essence, he followed his usual pattern, pursuing his desires decisively. Within 8 months, they were practically cohabiting. When Nick proposed at Clemente's following a lengthy romantic dinner, she tearfully accepted, threw her arms around him, and admired the ring he placed on her finger as onlookers smiled. Was their marriage flawless? Certainly not, but Nick would argue it was excellent. Emily was affectionate and giving, possessed a wonderful sense of humor, excelled with their sons. And Nick was certain of her love for him. While their intimate life had become somewhat routine, primarily due to the demands of dual careers and caring for an 8- and 6-year-old, it remained satisfying. Nick was completely unaware of Emily's restlessness or frustration, let alone the possibility of her engaging in an affair. It infuriated him to no end that she was doing it so callously. This wasn't just a drunken mistake that he could possibly comprehend. No, someone was actively pursuing her, enticing her, and she seemed to be enjoying it, considering a fling acceptable because her life felt dull. As Nick pondered all of this, he found himself gritting his teeth. If she wanted a change, he'd give her one, though it wouldn't be the kind she desired. Around 6:30, as usual, when he entered the door, Nick had his plans neatly laid out. He had spent 2 hours at the library with his laptop, exchanging messages with Brian Wenders, his friend who worked in IT. Brian had sent him the necessary file along with detailed instructions on its usage. Nick was incredibly angry with Emily, and he was certain she would notice that something was amiss. However, that was precisely part of his plan, for Emily to sense that something was bothering Nick, something he wasn't prepared to discuss. Therefore, when he encountered her in the kitchen and greeted her with a kiss, he deliberately avoided eye contact, withdrew from her hug a bit quicker than usual, and abruptly went to greet the boys. During dinner, he allowed himself to appear somewhat distant and troubled. Emily noticed everything, and he could tell it was unsettling her. Later, when the kids were asleep and they were watching TV in bed, she asked him what was bothering him. "Is it work-related, darling? You seem preoccupied tonight." She was worried but not panicked. He could sense that. She hadn't yet suspected that it had anything to do with her. He let out a heavy sigh. "I just have a lot on my mind, that's all. Some decisions to make." "About work? Is it still about that promotion?" He gazed at her intently, prolonging the silence. "No, it's not related to work at all." Emily moved closer, taking his hands. "Then what is it, honey? Don't let it eat away at you. Please, share with me." Her concern was genuine, but it only frustrated him further. He withdrew his hand, saying, "I'm not ready to discuss it, Em. Maybe in a few days. I need some time to think." Emily stared at him, troubled by this unusual behavior from her husband. Yet he could see that she wasn't afraid. It hadn't occurred to her that he knew about her and that jerk, Pritzker. "Okay, Nick," she finally said. "Just don't shut me out, all right? I love you. Let me be there for you." He grunted in response and turned his attention back to the TV, feeling her eyes on him. Around 10:30, Emily went out into the hallway to check on the boys. When she returned, she headed to the bathroom to get ready for bed. When she came out, Nick understood her intentions. She was wearing a light blue nightgown, Nick's favorite nightgown, and her hair was loose, so that it cascaded over her shoulders. She looked amazing. "Baby," she said in a flirtatious tone, "maybe I can help you. Forget about your worries for a while." She climbed onto the bed. Nick considered all the options and came to the conclusion that it was better to give in and make love to her. But Nick did not succeed. The image of his wife cheating on him did not leave his head. Emily stared at him with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Darling, what's the matter? Are you—" She paused, not knowing how to finish the sentence. Avoiding her gaze, Nick shifted his gaze to the far wall and muttered, "I'm sorry, Em. I guess I have a lot on my mind. I'm sorry. He got out of bed and headed to the bathroom to brush his teeth, a fierce grin playing on his lips. When he returned, he tried not to meet her eyes, turned off the light, and went to bed, turning away from her. Emily moved closer, hugged him from behind, and gently stroked his back, whispering words of comfort. "Don't worry, dear. We can try again tomorrow." Nick winced inwardly. "Oh, wife, you have no idea what's going to happen now." Throughout the weekend, Nick portrayed the role of a preoccupied, anxious spouse, leaving Emily increasingly uneasy. Despite his attempts to moderate his behavior, he frequently sighed, avoided eye contact, and even recoiled when she tried to embrace him. He refrained from mentioning her interaction with Pritzker, unsure if she had realized he knew about it. However, it was evident that she was genuinely concerned. When it was time for Charlie's t-ball game, Nick declined to attend, citing work and the need for introspection. Emily appeared distressed. They never missed Charlie's Saturday games, and Nick usually eagerly anticipated them. Nonetheless, she simply nodded and offered to massage his shoulders for a moment. After leaving the house, Nick retrieved his laptop and retreated to the study. He transferred the keylogger program Brian had provided onto a flash drive, then inserted it into Emily's computer and completed the installation. In less than 10 minutes, he had it operational. On Nick's command, it would replicate all activity from Emily's computer onto his own laptop. A quick search revealed that her Hotmail account was password protected, which wasn't surprising. The password, Charlie Ben, was swiftly discovered by Nick. Notably, Emily hadn't sent any new messages since the previous day. "Good," he muttered to himself before proceeding to pack a suitcase, which he discreetly stashed behind the living room sofa. On Saturday night, Nick rejected any advances from Emily, offering vague excuses about being tired. Throughout Sunday, he mostly ignored her, spending the day engaged in activities with the boys, indulging in all their favorite pastimes. By Sunday night, Emily appeared visibly distressed, but Nick rebuffed all her attempts to discuss it. Retiring to bed early, he turned away from her, visibly tensing when she attempted to cuddle up to him. Monday was the day Nick planned to take decisive action. During breakfast with the children, he assumed the role of a troubled individual attempting to maintain a facade of normalcy, forcing smiles, giving his wife a heartfelt kiss while glancing over her shoulder, appearing somewhat preoccupied. Upon leaving at 8:30, he drove most of the way to work before stopping and parking in the KFC lot. Retrieving his laptop, he accessed Emily's Hotmail account. Had he unsettled her enough to alter her intentions? Indeed, there were 2 new messages. The first, sent by Emily on Sunday afternoon while he was playing with the boys in the backyard, read, "Hey, April. Something's off with Nick. He seems distant and troubled, and he won't open up to me about it. I don't think it's work-related. It's as if he feels guilty about something, almost afraid of me. Can I call you tomorrow to discuss? Love, E." The second message, directed to that jerk Pritzker, was succinct and gratifying. Emily had composed it that very morning at 8:38, just 5 minutes after Nick had departed from the house. "Dear Jason, I regret to inform you that I am unable to meet with you today or in the future. My feelings for you became too overwhelming, but I must put an end to it. Please refrain from contacting me any further. I apologize. Emily." Nick leaned back, pondering. He had achieved part of his goal, that much was evident. Emily was concerned enough about her marriage to realize the folly of her involvement with Jason Pritzker. Whatever issues she had with her husband, witnessing his distress and withdrawal, had recalibrated her priorities. But was that sufficient? Absolutely not. The resounding answer was absolutely not. For 2 compelling reasons, one logical and the other more intuitive, Nick recognized that his mysterious behavior had instilled a significant fear in Emily, prompting her to halt her flirtation with that jerk. However, did this guarantee she wouldn't stray again? He saw no reason why not. What would prevent a recurrence, be it in a year or 5, once she felt reassured about her marriage. Couldn't she easily succumb to the allure of excitement, then? Suffice it to say, Nick harbored no confidence that it wouldn't happen again. The second reason was straightforward. Nick was filled with rage. He felt wounded and furious. He had poured everything into Emily, his love, his loyalty, his tireless effort, and they both cherished their 2 wonderful boys. Did she believe that his life was an endless thrill? Yet he wasn't sneaking around with another woman like she had been with that jerk. Sure, the email to Jason was a positive development, but it wasn't nearly sufficient to deter him from proceeding with his intended course of action. At 10:15, Nick returned his car to the driveway. He had informed the office earlier that he would be absent for the morning. His original intention was to catch Emily off guard as she prepared to leave for her appointment with Pritzker, but she had canceled it. Instead, he discovered her on the phone, likely speaking to her sister. She turned to him, surprised. "Hi, Nick. Just give me a moment." "April? Nick's back home. How about I call you later?" "Okay, bye." She ended the call and approached Nick. "Is everything all right, honey? I didn't expect to see you this morning." Nick gave her a serious, troubled expression. Can you come sit in the living room with me, please? I need to talk to you." She sat on the couch and observed him pacing, appearing uncertain. Seeing her worried expression, he eventually settled into a chair across from her. "Emily, I was planning to discuss this with you tonight, but as I was driving to work, I realized there's no point in waiting. There's never a right time to say it. I'm moving out. I'm considering getting a divorce." He watched her, noticing her mouth hanging open in disbelief as if her jaw muscles had stopped working. She stared at him, swallowing hard. "Nick, why? We love each other. We have a great marriage. Why?" Tears began to stream down her face. "Why would you do this? Leave me, leave Charlie and Ben." He stood up and paced the room, voicing the thoughts that had occupied his mind since Friday. "There's no spark left, Em. Marriage has become incredibly monotonous. I go to work, return home, spend time with the kids, put them to bed. We watch TV, exchange goodnight kisses, and go to sleep. Rinse and repeat. I crave a bit of thrill, something fresh, something that ignites me, makes my heart race." He paused, glancing at Emily. She turned ashen, wondering if she could sense he was echoing her own sentiments to her sister. "I've found someone who—" "No!" she cried out, desperation evident. Springing up, she pleaded, "No, Nick, please tell me you're not She dissolved into tears. "I'm not cheating, Emily. I wouldn't betray you like that. I haven't even kissed her or laid a finger on her yet, and I won't, not while we—" He trailed off, watching her sob, her entire frame trembling. Then he delivered his final words. "I crave that spark. I desire someone who will desire me, make me feel attractive, make me feel like a man once more, rather than a weary soul aging prematurely. Listen, I'll be away on a business trip until Friday. I've already booked a motel room for when I return. I'll give you a call, and we can arrange a time to talk, discuss how we'll settle things. If you think consulting a lawyer's wise, it's probably a good idea." She stared at him in shock as he retrieved the suitcase from behind the couch. "No, Nick, please, darling, can't we—" "I'm deeply sorry, Emily." He turned and walked out the door, hearing her heart-breaking sobs trailing after him. Despite his anger and pain, he still empathized with her. She was in anguish, and the part of him that thought, "She deserves it, the woman," clashed with the part that yearned to return inside, hold her close, wipe away her tears, and reassure her that everything would be okay. He thought to himself with a grim sort of satisfaction. That was satisfying as hell. Nick sat at his desk, gazing out the window. He had gone straight to work. The business trip he had mentioned to Emily was a complete lie. He simply wanted her to feel miserable for a few days. He called Suzanne into his office and briefly explained the situation to her. Emily and I are experiencing some tension at home. So I'll be away for a couple of days, and she believes I'm on a business trip until Thursday night. Just in case she happens to call, all right? Suzanne looked concerned. I'm really sorry, Nick. Is there anything I can do to help? He shook his head. Thanks, Suzanne, but no, I hope we'll be able to work through it. She smiled slightly and remarked, I've been there before. Ralph and I once separated for almost a month back when we didn't have kids. It was tough at the time, but now we look back and laugh about it. They exchanged a few more words before Suzanne left the office, and Nick realized he felt a bit relieved. I'm definitely not the only one dealing with marriage issues, he thought to himself. Nick was surprised at how quickly the 3 days flew by. He had reserved a comfortable room at the Hyatt on Capitol Square for easy access to his office. Working late into the evenings, he returned to his room around 9 p.m. for a quick dinner via room service. Despite the long hours, he managed to accomplish a great deal, outlining both short-term and long-term plans for his new department. He communicated with his contacts in Tokyo via phone calls and emails, consulted with colleagues from the Far East stationed at Thomaston, and generally got his new job off to a solid start. Throughout the days, he checked his cell phone a few times, finding messages from Emily each time, all of which he deleted without bothering to listen. He did the same with her emails, quickly scanning them to ensure there were no issues concerning his sons. Despite his busy schedule, Nick couldn't shake the loneliness. He missed Emily despite his anger, and he longed to be with his boys. At one point, he even contemplated parking near his house just to catch a glimpse of them, but decided to wait until Friday. This business trip provided him with a glimpse of what a divorce might entail, and he found the prospect unsettling. However, that wasn't his intention. His plan was to terrify Emily, to shock her into realizing the gravity of their situation and, hopefully, to salvage their marriage. If that failed, he resolved to confront the situation as it arose. Nick exercised admirable self-control, waiting until Thursday afternoon before checking Emily's clandestine email account. He was curious about her activities, but also sought to spare himself ongoing anguish. Upon investigation, he discovered no correspondence to or from April. Evidently, she and Emily communicated via phone. However, there were 6 messages from the detestable Pritzker since Monday morning. Nick wondered why Emily had a change of heart. What had transpired to disrupt their once magical connection? He pondered his potential missteps and her reasons for being upset. It was evident that Pritzker, aware of Nick's proximity to Emily, felt the sting of rejection. Nick smirked at the realization. Emily disregarded the initial 4 messages. In response to the 5th, sent on Wednesday, she tersely replied, Jason, let it go. I won't meet you again. Cease contacting me. Emily. Jason reached out once more, albeit with less conviction, suggesting she keep him in mind. He understood he had lost, at least temporarily. And, Nick mused, I've emerged victorious for now. But how long will it last? That was the lingering question. What measures could prevent a recurrence of this situation? Around 11 a.m. on Friday, Nick called Emily from his cell phone. He aimed for a professional tone, not too abrupt. Hi, Emily, it's me. How are the boys? Nick, oh my God. Emily's voice trembled. How are you? I've missed you so much. And the boys, they... She trailed off, overcome with emotion. I'll be boarding a plane shortly, okay? I'll be home for dinner tonight. I was thinking, could your parents perhaps take the boys tomorrow, have them stay over for a visit, and then you and I could have some time to chat? Nick sensed her regaining composure. I'm sure they'd be thrilled. I'll arrange it with them today. Honey, what do you want for dinner tonight? I want to make something special. Nick chuckled. Oh, it doesn't matter, Em. No need to go all out. Just make something Ben and Charlie enjoy, like hot dogs, anything. Okay, honey. Emily sounded disappointed. Did she expect him to instantly reconcile? Nick shook his head. Gotta run. See you tonight. Bye. He ended the call before she could express her inevitable, I love you. Nick's comeback was incredible. The boys swarmed around him, brimming with excitement, as he allowed them to playfully wrestle with him, cling to him, and share all their recent stories. They were ecstatic about the Columbus Clippers hats he had purchased for them, eagerly retrieving their baseball gloves for a game in the backyard. Emily observed all of this with evident sorrow. Although he had permitted her embrace upon his arrival, he withdrew sooner than she wished, and her gaze trailed him sadly as he immersed himself back into their sons' lives. Perhaps she had hoped that his startling announcement had been a mere illusion, that things would return to normalcy, but it was evident that wasn't the case. Nick permitted Ben and Charlie to stay up unusually late, nearly until 11. Partly, it was to prolong Emily's visible distress, but mostly, he simply missed spending time with them. It wasn't until they could barely keep their eyes open that he acquiesced to Emily's suggestion that it was time to put them to bed. After sharing the final story and sipping the last of their water, he promptly prepared for bed. Before Emily could initiate either a romantic encounter or a conversation, Nick had already settled his head on the pillow and turned off the light. She made an attempt nonetheless. Sweetheart? Can we talk for a moment? In the darkness, Nick smiled to himself. Tomorrow, all right, Em? This trip has been draining, and the boys really wore me out tonight. Your parents are taking them tomorrow, right? Yes, I told them I'd drop them off around 11. Okay, then. Have a good sleep. He didn't offer her a kiss or a hug. Now that he was back home, the frustration that had simmered during his hectic work week flared up again. It took him a while to drift off, and as he lay there, he noticed Emily tossing and turning beside him. Saturday morning's atmosphere was calm, although Charlie and Ben were full of energy, bouncing around excitedly. Dad had returned, and they were about to head to Grandma and Grandpa's for an overnight stay. Can we bring our baseball gloves and our new hats? Will Grandpa play baseball with us? And so on. Nick quietly relished Emily's somber expressions. When she was ready to leave with the boys, he simply remarked, We'll discuss this when you return. Upon Emily's return, the house was deserted, leaving her to endure an agonizing hour seated at the kitchen table, staring out at the driveway and envisioning the worst. Finally, Nick arrived with a stack of U-Haul boxes, prompting Emily to burst into tears. Handing her a napkin, Nick said, Come on, Em, everything's okay. Let's talk this out like adults. However, he had to wait for nearly 5 minutes until her crying stopped, and another 5 while she freshened up and fixed her makeup. When she returned, she appeared improved, still distraught, yet strangely beautiful in Nick's eyes. He was truly infatuated with her despite his inner thoughts. She brought them cups of coffee and sat down at the table again. Can I speak first, Nick? He nodded. Leaning forward, she looked at him earnestly. I don't want a divorce or a separation. I want you, and I want our marriage to work. I love you, and I know you love me, Nick. You adore the boys, too. We should stay together. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to improve our marriage, anything. Just tell me where to begin. He studied her, maintaining a neutral expression. The thrill is gone, Em. Don't tell me you haven't felt it too. The monotony of everyday life, the chores, the kids, the bills. Can you honestly say you haven't noticed? Haven't you been tempted to seek something else, something more exciting, someone who could reignite that spark in your life? The critical moment arrived. He pondered whether she would once again dissolve into tears, flee the room, or perhaps meet his gaze squarely and deceive him. Instead, she uttered, Yes, I've sensed it, Nick, and I've been a complete fool. I fear that when you learn about it, you'll simply walk away, and I'll lose you forever. She trembled, clutching the fingers of her left hand with such force with her right that he feared she might injure herself. Yet she never averted her eyes from him. Maintaining a composed demeanor, he inquired, "What are you referring to?" With rigidity, she rose, retrieved 3 sheets of paper from the cabinet above the refrigerator, and presented them. "I couldn't bring myself to confess, so I wrote everything down. I'll retreat to the bedroom and grant you all the time you require. But Nick, can you promise me, please, if only for the sake of our years together, promise me that you'll discuss this with me before making any decisions?" He gazed into her anxious, tear-streaked countenance. "All right," he conceded. Accepting the papers, he retired to the living room to peruse them, hearing her sobs trailing behind him as she retreated down the hallway to their bedroom. Her letter contained little that he wasn't already aware of, or had strongly suspected. She had encountered Pritzker at the seminar, where he had singled her out and engaged in discreet flirtation. Subsequently, he had acquired her email address and extended an invitation for what ostensibly seemed like a harmless business lunch. Emily had felt flattered, and he had adeptly pursued her over several weeks. At an early stage, he had proposed that she establish a private email account just to avoid any misinterpretations regarding their relationship. To Nick's discernment, she seemed to be recounting the entire truth. There were 4 instances where she and Pritzker had crossed the line of acceptable conduct for the individuals married to others. The initial of these had been a prolonged, intimate kiss in the parking lot behind a cafe where they had shared coffee. After that, there were 3 meetings in Pritzker's car, parked on a secluded forest path next to the local golf course, and each time he pushed the boundaries a little. During these meetings, there was no specific intimacy. They just gave each other satisfaction with their hands. In addition to expressing her deep apologies and declarations of love for Nick, Emily was quite harsh to herself in the letter. "I was being stupid," was one of her self-critical remarks. She openly admitted her initial naivety about Pritzker's intentions, which was followed by a period of denial about the seriousness and immorality of her actions. "I was kidding myself, Nick," she confessed at the end. "I put aside thoughts of my marriage vows, of my obligations to you and our sons. I treated it like a harmless flirtation with a friend at a social event. I am consumed with unspeakable shame. And when you mentioned the divorce, it suddenly dawned on me how self-centered, how immature I was, thinking that my desire to have a little fun justified betrayal behind your back. I didn't sleep with him. Please believe me. But I won't deny that it could have happened. Jason was pursuing it, and if you hadn't walked out, it might have happened. I'm through with him completely, regardless of what happens. I never want to see him again, even if you never forgive me, even if you divorce me. I deeply regret not realizing sooner the damage I was causing us. I can't help but wonder if things would be different if I had invested more in our marriage, made it more exciting instead of entertaining Jason's advances. Maybe you'd still want to be with me instead of seeking that spark elsewhere. I'm truly sorry. Can you find it in your heart to forgive me? Will you give me the chance to make it right? Your foolish, loving wife, Emily. Nick watched the backyard for a while before heading to the bedroom. Emily was curled up, fast asleep under the covers. Nick watched her in silence for several minutes, feeling a sudden wave of fatigue. He got into bed next to her and quickly fell asleep. Some time later, he woke up to feel the warmth of Emily clinging to him. When he opened his eyes, he realized that she was insistently kissing his neck and looking at his face with despair. Tears welled up in her eyes as she clung to him tightly. "Please, Nick," she begged. "Just love me. No matter what happens, no matter what you decide, just hug me and love me." Nick's reaction could be described with the phrase, "What the hell?" Unsure of what lies ahead or even what he wants, he has not found a good reason to stop Emily's actions. They had an intimacy. Then they lay side by side, still entwined in each other, and Emily cried softly on his shoulder. Every attempt to pull away was met with a strong grip, that didn't want to let go. Eventually, he uttered, "I need to use the bathroom, Em," and she let him go. Upon his return, he positioned himself against the headboard, observing her distressed and uncertain expression. "How can I possibly regain trust in you?" he questioned. With a lowered gaze, she nodded. "I mean, this wasn't just a drunken mistake or a one-night lapse in judgment. This was a calculated involvement, an ongoing affair spanning weeks. Planned rendezvous, exchanged emails, finding opportunities, waiting for when your husband would be absent. It's incredibly calculated, Emily." "I understand," she murmured, avoiding eye contact. It's truly awful, what I've done. There's no excuse." Then she added, "But I didn't sleep with him, you know. I mean, not actually." In a burst of anger, Nick retorted, "But you were planning to, weren't you? Until I ruined your plans?" Once again, she nodded, tears evident on her face. "So, how can I trust you now? How can I live with the constant fear of another opportunist trying to get into your pants?" She sat up abruptly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Are you considering it, Nick? Is there still a chance for us?" She appeared both hopeful and apprehensive. "I'm unsure. You know the saying, once burned, twice shy, right? It means if you experience something painful once, you're cautious about it in the future. But then there's once a cheater, always a cheater. How can I be certain that even if I manage to forgive you for betraying me, you won't do it again in the future when things settle down? I'm afraid that once the dust settles and life returns to normal, you might repeat your actions when things get boring again." Suddenly, he felt the urge to leave, to end the conversation. He stood up and began dressing. When Emily tried to speak, he raised his hand. "No more, Em. All right? Not now. I need some time alone. Either make dinner or call me later and I'll pick up some takeout. We can talk then." And he left the bedroom. Who knows why? His second, third, and fourth shots at the range were flawless drives, almost 250 yards each, straight down the middle. The next 50, however, were all over the place. Still, he broke a sweat, and the hour spent without dwelling on his marriage was a relief. But the relief faded on the journey home, despite taking the scenic route around the park, enjoying the sunshine, and watching joggers and cyclists making the most of the day. What next? His questions to Emily weren't just rhetorical. He'd achieved his goal. His preemptive move had ended her affair with that jerk and put fear into her. Yet, that now felt like the easy part. How could they rebuild their marriage? Emily had prepared a paella, including shrimp and chorizo sausage, which happened to be one of Nick's favorite dishes. They ate quietly, Emily watching Nick's expressions closely for any signs of his mood. After clearing the plates, Nick suggested they move to the deck. Emily brought out 2 cups of coffee, and they settled at the small table. "All right," Nick began. "The ball's in your court. You messed things up. How do you plan to fix them? Do you still want to be with me, Nick?" "Yes. I love you, Emily, both you and the boys. I don't want to end up as a divorced dad in a tiny apartment, only seeing my kids on weekends. But you've just shattered this marriage. How do you intend to rebuild it?" Emily started to cry once more, motioning for him to wait. "Please, just wait," she pleaded. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she wiped away her tears. "I promised myself I wouldn't cry anymore. Just give me a moment." She rose, crossing her arms tightly over her chest, and paced the deck a few times before settling back down to face him. "Let me explain," she said, her voice strained. "Firstly, I will fully confess everything to you, every aspect of my foolish, senseless actions. I've attempted to do so in the letter, and if you have any further questions now or later, feel free to ask, and I'll provide answers. Secondly, I extend my sincerest apologies to you, not just once, but as many times as necessary, until you truly understand how deeply sorry and ashamed I am. Ashamed of my actions, and remorseful for the pain I've caused you." She then knelt before him, placing her arms on his knees and meeting his gaze. "I am truly sorry, Nick. I have hurt you immensely, and there's no justification. I behaved selfishly and foolishly. I hope that someday you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. But I understand if that time is not now. Not yet." Continuing to observe him, she rose and returned to her seat. "Thirdly, I strive to compensate for my mistakes every single day. I demonstrate my capacity to be a loving, devoted wife who values and cherishes you, prioritizing your happiness above all else. Merely being your wife brings me joy." Enumerating them on her fingers, she declared, "I commit to being affectionate, patient, supportive, attentive, and enjoyable. I will spoil you, attend to your needs, and ensure your satisfaction." Reaching out, she clasped his hand. "This extends to our intimate life as well. I understand it may have become somewhat predictable, but that ends now. Whether it involves reading books, acquiring enticing lingerie, or indulging in spontaneous encounters anywhere, Nick, I'm game for it all. And what about the other woman I've been involved with?" He studied her, his expression neutral. Emily chewed her lip. "I can't control that, Nick. I hope you'll choose to end it, but ultimately it's not my decision, is it? But here's what I propose. Could we give it a try for a month, perhaps? Just you and me? I'll do everything in my power to bring you happiness, to keep our relationship vibrant and fulfilling at home, demonstrating my remorse and unwavering love for you." Nick rose from his seat and strolled to the distant edge of the deck, turning his back on Emily as he grinned to himself. A blend of anger, excitement, and self-satisfaction churned within him. This was his usual pattern: identify his desires, pursue them relentlessly, and usually achieve them. Or so it appeared. Swiveling back towards Emily, he declared, "All right, Em. I'll give it a month. There's no rush for me to leave this place and the kids, and I won't encounter her again while we attempt to mend things." Emily leapt up with anticipation, but Nick halted her with a raised hand. "But don't you dare think I'm not livid with you or that I trust you even an inch, because I'm furious. What you did with that jerk was disgraceful and cheap. It wasn't worthy of you and definitely not of the love I've given you. It was awful." With that, he turned his back on her and stormed back into the house. A month passed, followed by a couple more weeks. Nick hadn't mentioned deadlines, and Emily wasn't going to bring it up either. Everything was fine. It seemed to him that everything was all right. They got along great, and Charlie and Ben didn't seem to notice any problems. At least it was a positive thing. Emily was attentive, devoted, and loving. They had many intimate moments when they fulfilled Nick's wishes, and she seemed eager to please him. But it wasn't just about intimacy. There were back massages, special desserts, and a weekend trip to a lovely lakeside bed and breakfast organized while her parents looked after the boys. Emily constantly looked out for him, satisfying all his needs, as if she were a royal concubine, fearing exile or worse for any wrong move. So why wasn't Nick happier? He thought about it during a busy day at work, unable to concentrate. Putting the papers aside, he leaned back in his chair, put his feet on the table, and allowed himself 15 minutes to reflect. It was clear. His trust in her hadn't returned. The betrayal involving Pritzker, though incomplete, still stung whenever he dwelled on it. Logically, he knew Emily wouldn't dare repeat such an act. But the initial offense lingered, a harsh reminder. Though his fury had somewhat subsided, it lurked beneath the surface. Yet another concern dawned on him. His wife seemed more like a servant now. Emily was tense, walking on eggshells, always gauging his reactions for any hint of displeasure. Her motto appeared to be, "Please Nick," or perhaps, "Don't upset Nick," or even, "Anticipate Nick's every desire, even before he voices it." In the earlier, happier days of their marriage, Emily had been a vibrant companion. She was lively, humorous, and spirited, no pushover. She challenged him, disagreed when necessary, even teased him. They were equals, loving partners, unafraid to challenge each other. Now that dynamic had vanished. Nick was convinced that he had undergone a transformation as well. He had become more callous, more distant. Gone were the days when he would return home eager to share every detail of his workday with Emily, or engage in heartfelt conversations about their relationship. Instead, he observed her with detachment, allowing her to cater to him, whether it was preparing a fancy dinner or engaging in intimate encounters, like the one where she would be positioned over the living room couch. Oddly enough, it was one of his preferred methods, though she never found it particularly enjoyable. To her, it felt degrading. Yet now she would tolerate it 5 nights a week if he desired. He came to the realization that he didn't desire a submissive partner. He longed for his former wife. However, he was introspective enough to recognize that the change wasn't solely on her part. He had transformed as well. He was perceptive enough to acknowledge that he was clueless about how to rekindle what they once had. In the 3rd week of September, Emily resumed her teaching duties, maintaining her routine of special dinners, Victoria's secret nightwear, and passionate intimacy. Despite her efforts to uphold cheerfulness and affection, the strain was evident on her face, especially when she wasn't aware of being observed. Then, one Thursday evening around 6:30, everything changed. As Nick entered the house and approached Emily in the kitchen with a casual greeting and a kiss attempt, he was met with a cold response. "It seems someone's received a promotion," she uttered through gritted teeth, her demeanor akin to that of an infuriated drill sergeant. "Did you have any intention of informing me about it?" Before Nick could respond, Emily turned away, dismissing any potential reply. "No, save your words. I'm fetching the boys." With that, she stormed out into the yard, summoning Charlie and Ben. Throughout dinner, amidst the boys' chatter, Emily shot Nick murderous glances. It was almost comical, and Nick realized it had been nearly 2 months since he last saw his wife angry at him. Strangely, he found himself somewhat enjoying the experience, though he couldn't quite pinpoint why. Emily declined Nick's assistance with putting the boys to bed, prompting him to give up and watch a rerun of NCIS. Around 9 o'clock, when she entered the living room, he sensed her readiness to confront him. "Fine," he thought. "Let's argue. Let's see how that goes. Do you realize how humiliating it was speaking to Suzanne today?" Emily glared at him, remaining standing with her arms crossed instead of sitting down. "She reminded me that she had to prompt you to bring your passport so she could arrange the visas for your upcoming trips to Japan and Singapore. And then she said, 'Oh, Emily, you must be so proud of him, with this big promotion and all. Did you guys have a big celebration?' I was so shocked I didn't know what to say. Eventually, I stumbled out something like, yeah, it's been great,' or whatever. I felt like a complete idiot, Nick. I'm sure Suzanne could tell I had no clue what she was talking about. She mentioned that you were promoted back in July, and now over 2 months later, and you haven't said a word to me about it. Was I supposed to go on not knowing I'm married to the vice president for Far East sales? Suddenly, is that none of my business?" She paced the room, then settled into the armchair opposite the sofa. Nick stayed silent. She continued in the same vein for a few more minutes, expressing disbelief at his secrecy, her humiliation, and more. She was seething with anger, which seemed to alleviate some of the tension from recent weeks. "I understand our marriage is fragile, and I know it's my fault. I think about it every hour. But you promised we'd both try. I assumed that meant communication, sharing news like, I don't know, a huge promotion." Emily glared at him, her mouth closing abruptly. Nick noticed tears welling in her eyes. "Well," he began, "you're clearly upset." "Of course I am," she cut in. "But did Suzanne mention when I got the promotion?" Emily shook her head. "Just said it was sometime in July." "And do you remember anything else from July?" Her face paled and she looked down. Yes, I do. I found out about your promotion and your conversations with Pritzker before I had the chance to share my news with you," he said, his voice growing stern. "And, incidentally, I found out on the same day. I came home for lunch and saw your email open, along with your messages to that individual." Emily gasped, her eyes fixed on him. He had never revealed this to her before. "And when I realized that you were hiding something from me, something quite significant for our marriage, I didn't feel inclined to share my own news with you. Is that difficult to comprehend?" She shook her head, looking crestfallen. Her resistance had dissipated. Nick stood up, pacing back and forth. "So yes, you're correct, I should have informed you. But perhaps I was relishing in keeping my secret from you, Em. A bit of tit for tat, if you will. Besides, at least my secret was something positive, not something underhanded and self-serving." "I'm going for a walk," he declared, and left without looking back, leaving her to cry silently. The following morning passed in near silence as Emily and Nick went about their morning routine, preparing breakfast, dressing Ben and Charlie, and getting them ready for school. There was a sense of efficiency between them, devoid of any warmth or friction. Nick couldn't gauge Emily's emotions. He himself felt calm and even relaxed, having gained some clarity after their argument the previous night and his subsequent walk around the neighborhood. After Emily returned from seeing the boys off to school, she retreated to the bedroom without a word. His sudden voice made her jump, and she turned to him, looking unhappy and cautious. "How about I bring home some takeout tonight so you don't have to cook?" "That would be nice, Nick." "Thank you," she replied carefully. They discussed various options like Chinese, Mexican, and Middle Eastern cuisine before settling on Five Guys hamburgers, which the boys loved. Then he added, "And I'd like us to spend some time together tonight after the boys are in bed, okay?" She looked even more apprehensive, but nodded in agreement. Nick approached her, held her gently, and kissed her, feeling her tense up like a statue in his arms. The boys thoroughly enjoyed the hamburgers, as expected. Nick and Emily worked together to bathe them and tuck them into bed, exchanging smiles as the usual bathtub water fight resulted in a wet bathroom floor. After both kids were peacefully asleep, Nick and Emily settled on opposite ends of the living room couch. The warm, friendly atmosphere they had while caring for Ben and Charlie had faded away, replaced by a sense of tension emanating from Emily. "All right," Nick began, noticing her cautious expression. "I think last night went well." Emily seemed surprised momentarily, then her expression softened as she nodded. "Yes, I believe so too. They both paused, then chuckled. Nick spoke up. "I have a few things to say, but you can go first." Emily hesitated before speaking. "I think it was good because it hurt me so deeply, so much. I mean, there you were with this big promotion, this exciting new job, probably with a lot more money, and I had no clue about any of it. You kept this huge secret from me, and She locked eyes with him. "I felt so left out and betrayed, and I was furious. And then you told me exactly when you found out, and naturally I understood why you hadn't told me. And all this time, I thought you only found out about my affair. When I confessed to you in the letter, I had no idea you had discovered it on your own. My goodness, Nick, I am so sorry for that." She let out a sigh. "That really deflated me. But upon reflection, I saw it as a valuable lesson. I've been consumed with guilt for weeks over what I did to hurt you, fearing you'd leave me, and for once I felt hurt myself. How could you do that to me? Then it hit me. Maybe I'm finally grasping how Nick has been feeling all this time. Betrayed, sidelined, left in the dark. Except the secret I kept from you was far worse." She paused, tears glistening on her cheeks. "So I realized anything that wounds me like that lets me empathize with you. Must be beneficial. I've been so wrapped up in my own guilt and fear, I haven't truly considered your feelings." She chuckled sadly. "Well, after last night, that issue is resolved." Nick listened as Emily fell silent. He responded, "Yeah, I agree. That's one of two reasons why last night was positive. But strangely enough, the other reason is that it was the first time in over 2 months you haven't been tiptoeing around me. You were angry. You really gave it to me. And guess what? I realized I missed it." They exchanged smiles, both finding amusement in the moment. "I used to want you to be submissive for a time. I desired you to feel guilty, ashamed, and afraid that I might leave. But that phase is wearing thin, you know? The compliant Emily isn't the woman I married. She's not the woman I love. And I've come to realize that while you keep asking for my trust again, you haven't been trusting me. Not to walk away, that is. You doubt my love and my efforts to give us another chance." He grew increasingly agitated, taking a breath. "Why should I trust you after what you did when you won't trust me? So, Em, you need to trust me. You need to rediscover yourself and remember how long I've cherished you." Another pause. "Maybe you were acting like a doormat because you thought I wanted it, but I'm done with that. The month I initially gave you has stretched to 7 weeks, and still, I'm here. I'm here every night, sleeping beside you, and I'm not seeing anyone else." He observed her, pondering. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "I'll work on that." They spent the rest of the evening apart. At 10:20, Nick suddenly felt so drained he could barely keep his head up, so he undressed, brushed his teeth, and went to sleep. Sometime later, he felt Emily slip into bed behind him. She kissed the back of his neck, then nestled close to spoon him. Afterward, there wasn't any big event, no sudden changes, but things improved. About a week later, he began feeling more affectionate towards Emily, noticing that their conversations flowed more easily and were less strained. One evening, when he forgot to pick up the dry cleaning as promised, she scolded him for being inconsiderate, then paused, looking slightly concerned, before shrugging and returning to her cooking. "I'm sorry, Em. You're right. I'll bring it tomorrow, I promise," he replied, watching her reaction with a slight half-smile. "All right," she said, and they left it as it was. Later, when she climbed into bed, dressed only in her usual nightgown, she snuggled up to him and rested her head on his chest. "Let's get intimate tonight. Like before, okay?" she suggested. There was nothing unusual about it. In fact, it was somewhat awkward. After that, she clung to him tighter than usual and whispered, "I love you." They fell asleep, huddled together, which they hadn't done for a long time. "I completed the task today," she murmured softly, her back turned towards him as she faced the stove. He had just returned from work. He immediately understood her meaning. They had discussed and planned it a few days prior, how Emily would reach out to Pritzker's wife, in case she wasn't already aware of her husband's infidelity. "How did it go?" he inquired. She approached and pecked him on the cheek swiftly, appearing weary and slightly pale. "Not as dreadful as I had anticipated. When I explained the reason for my call, there was a prolonged silence, and then she confessed, 'Actually, this isn't the first time I've heard this tale. Turns out Jason has been engaging in this behavior towards her for years. She's caught him twice before. So I apologized once again, got her email address, and forwarded all our messages to her just in case she needs them for evidence.' She mentioned that after the last occurrence she had warned him, and he had made a solemn promise to her parents that if it ever recurred, he would be out. I believe she was considering calling a locksmith immediately, so he wouldn't even be able to access the house by the end of the day." He offered her a faint smile. It couldn't have happened to a more deserving person. Emily let out a small sigh, wrapping her arms around him and resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm really sorry, Nick. I know I've said it countless times, but right now, I'm feeling sorry for her too, And for what I did. 3 kids and married to that selfish jerk. About to become a divorced single mother. And what I did only made things worse. To be honest, Em, and I'm not just trying to console you. But if he hadn't targeted you, it would have been someone else. That guy is a despicable human being. I can empathize with his wife and kids, but Pritzker deserves whatever he gets. They were making progress, getting close to their goal, but he couldn't overlook it. Not yet. Then, a few days before Halloween, Nick walked into the office to find Suzanne quietly weeping at her desk. "Suzanne, what's the matter?" She glanced up, embarrassed. "It's nothing. It's just Matt. Her tears resumed. Matt was Suzanne's son. He was 26. Nick gently took her hand. "Come on, let's go to my office." He settled her onto his couch and shut the door. "Is he okay? Is he injured?" She shook her head. "No, it's not that. It's Tina, his fiancée. She broke up with him." Nick sat with Suzanne, listening quietly, comforting her, as the story unfolded. Matt and Tina were only 3 months away from their wedding when he cheated on her. He and his friends got heavily intoxicated on a trip to Miami Beach, and he had a one-night stand with a woman he met at a bar. Tina learned about it from mutual acquaintances and had called off the engagement, returned Matt's ring, and refused to communicate with him. Suzanne remarked, "Matt realizes he messed up, Nick. He's devastated. He's expressed his regret, pledging to do whatever it takes to make things right, swearing he'll never betray her again. He even mentioned seeking counseling. But she's deeply wounded, so furious. It pains me. Not only because Matt's my son, but because they were so perfect together. They truly brought each other joy. It's such a shame, you know? A wonderful relationship, ruined by one foolish mistake." They discussed it at length, and eventually Suzanne began to feel a bit relieved. She offered Nick a faint smile. "Thank you for being there, Nick. I'm sorry for getting so emotional, but..." "Don't apologize, Suzanne. I'd be upset too. I feel for Matt. Perhaps with time, Tina will reconsider giving him another chance." Suzanne headed to the restroom to freshen up, while Nick finally settled in to focus on his work. However, the story kept resurfacing in his thoughts throughout the day, inevitably leading him to contemplate his relationship with Emily. During the drive home, he confronted the pivotal question he had grappled with during the summer. Was he better off with or without Emily? The answer seemed clear. Did he desire to navigate the complexities of divorce, seeing his children only sporadically, residing in some solitary apartment, and re-entering the uncertain world of dating? No. Did he believe Emily would betray his trust again? While nothing in life is guaranteed, the answer leaned towards no. Had she taken responsibility for her mistakes and made genuine efforts to mend their relationship? Yes. Did he still harbor love for her? And did their life together bring him joy? The answer to both was a resounding yes. He dialed Emily's number from the car. "Hi, Em. Can you arrange for a sitter tonight? I'd like to take you out for dinner." "No, there's nothing special planned. I just want some time with my wife." "Okay, I'll be home in 20 minutes. We can discuss it then. Thanks. Bye." Nick had thoroughly enjoyed the veal saltimbocca at Bistro Romano, leaving him feeling satisfied, while Emily was a bit intoxicated after consuming most of their bottle of wine, as Nick was responsible for driving. After settling the babysitter, Nick waited until she safely drove away before securing the front door and turning off the outdoor lights. Finding Emily waiting for him near the stairs with a smile, Nick suggested, "Why don't you join me in the kitchen, Em? I fancy another half glass of wine." During dinner, Emily had initially been cautious, suspecting Nick had something serious on his mind. However, as the evening progressed, they both enjoyed themselves, and Emily now felt relaxed and content. Seated together, Nick shared news about Suzanne's son and his failed engagement. As he reached for Emily's hand, he expressed, "I've been contemplating it all day. Such a dismal conclusion, such a waste of what seemed like a wonderful relationship. I don't want that for us, Em. I want this to be behind us, all right? You and I, we're back. We're moving forward. You made a grave mistake, I was hurt and upset, but we've worked through it, and now it's time to move on. Are you okay with that? Emily smiled broadly and squeezed his hand tightly, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. Of course, dear. You know that's what I've always wanted. However, this does not mean that I will stop fighting my sense of shame. It will take some time, he replied. Well, I don't mind if you keep correcting your mistakes from time to time. Suddenly he chuckled. You know, I once read a story about a man whose wife cheated on him. Months later, she was still trying to earn his forgiveness. She begged, "If you had just stayed with me, I would have made love to you right at the mall if you wanted to." He smiled at her. Well, how about this, Em? Don't you want to do it at the mall? She calmly replied, No. But if you come upstairs with me right now, I'll do it in the hallway. They both burst out laughing. Nick took her hand. It's a deal, he said.